Here we are in the 24th century, and somehow charismatic cult leaders are still popping up in places on V'ger Please. A vile visit Bajor. My name is Joseph.
Commander Sisko. Your name is Ben. Your co-host.
Yeah, Ben is going to be working in the fields, Peter. We're going to send him to work in the fields.
Ridiculous.
Okay. What is the name of this episode?
All right. This is season 2, episode 15, Paradise. First aired February 13th, 1994. Teleplay by Jeff King, Richard Manning, and Hans Beimer. Story by Jim Trombetta and James Crocker. Directed by Corey Allen. All right, so King, Manning, Beimer, Trombetta, and Crocker. That's 5 people involved.
Yeah, it's 5 fucking names on this thing.
For a bullshit TNG. This would have been perfectly appropriate for TNG.
Correct. I think it works for DS9 too, and I'll get into why I think this works as a DS9 episode.
It does, but I can absolutely believe this was season 5 TNG that they just never had time to get around to. And again, right. 5 separate people being involved in this episode, which I think ultimately was an okay episode. But I don't think it required 5 people to make this thing.
There are some fantastic scenes in this episode. I can't wait to talk about it in contrast of having recently rewatched a couple Voyager episodes on Discord with some of our fans. 2 decent ones from season 1, in fact. And how much worse those entries are versus this, which is just some rando season 2 Deep Space Nine stuff that is not on anyone's Mount Rushmore of Star Trek, right? This is might as well just be background noise for Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
It is a extremely well acted and compelling drama featuring some pretty deep characterization moments for everyone involved, even your tertiary characters, in which case is Dax and Major Kira. And yeah, I agree with you. It ultimately comes out pretty good, but the pretty good of Deep Space Nine, I have so much more appreciation for. Would be amazing, great, fantastic if it was a Voyager episode. And I don't want to lose sight of that since those are our roots, you know? I think we're getting a touch spoiled for what it used to be like.
As someone who just sat through season 1 and 2 of Enterprise, I assure you I've not forgotten my trauma.
It's true. Yeah, we know how bad it can be. That's true.
As someone who sat there and honest to God watched Tom Paris put a gun to a Q's head. As someone who sat there and honest to God watched Tom Paris put a gun to the Borg Queen's head.
Such a good bit. We did it twice.
Such a fucking terrible bit. They did it twice.
And we obviously also made reference to something that we're going to get it out of the way because the imagery.
The wiki didn't want to get it out of the way.
The wiki chose not to mention this, not a fucking word. Which
and here we are in February.
It is February here as recording this.
It was February then too. This is February 13th.
It's a Black History Month episode. Okay, listen. There's no mention of this in the wiki. But if you watch this fucking thing, it is impossible. It is impossible not to notice. Then Commander Sisko, the visible black character on your television program, is made not only to work in the fields, which everybody does, but is actually punished by the imperious white plantation owner, we'll call her, by being forced into a hotbox, which is actually a punishment that was handed out to slaves in the antebellum South. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I tried to find out if they did that on purpose. And if somebody knows, if there's an interview with one of these fucking 5 guys who wrote this goddamn thing of like, yeah, we're going to like make a real point of this in the episode and really like have us have a roots moment. And we're going to make a direct corollary to, you know, agricultural slavery in the antebellum South through Sisko being punished in this way. Cool. Find me that clip. I trust someone to find it for me. Some quote somewhere. but I could not find anything that acknowledges that they did this on purpose.
It's not even just that Sisko's getting punished for it. It's O'Brien that gets caught being naughty, and Sisko gets punished instead.
Correct.
They jump over Miles O'Brien to snatch up Ben Sisko, or just Ben, as he's basically demeaned in this episode, right?
Correct. Yes.
There's two words you're going to hear a lot if you watch this TV show. Ben, which gets said, I think, about 106 times, and community, which gets said at least 2,000. There's another part of this episode that I like, and it's just what's going on Earth.
Yeah, no, there's a backbeat to the story here that's probably the most compelling reason to do it, which is what do humans look like that reject the 24th century magic, right? Like, who are saying living in this post-scarcity utopia is sanding off the edges of our capacity to act like humans and thrive in an adversarial environment, and I want to, go back to basics, which absolutely is something that should exist. And this is our first window into that idea in quite some time.
What's the premise here? Are they in the Alpha Quadrant or are they in the Gamma Quadrant?
They're in the Alpha Quadrant, which is why I think this episode makes sense as a Deep Space Nine episode. They are looking for habitable planets in this sector where the wormhole is.
Oh, why?
And you know why? Because you need to open up a space breezewood. This is about to be a highway to the other side of the galaxy, right?
So wait. You tell me that property, real estate matters around this area, right?
Yes. Like habitable moons around Bajor would have maybe been something really important to maintain.
So you're telling me that fracking a pleasant Southern California farming moon was probably a terrible idea made by the provisional government?
Yes, it was. It was a terrible idea.
You're telling me that taking a beautiful planet and handing it to the scabby people, the ungrateful scabs, was probably a bad idea.
It seems that they need a space breezewood. They need settle. I mean, it makes sense, right? From just a global political economic position, setting up settlements.
Just saying, both of those decisions, quote unquote, Ben had a direct hand in losing that real estate. So I think it's very fair that he's the one that gets stuck on this shitty away team mission from hell.
He's earned it karmically. And so, Deep Space Nine is the closest facility to it's in that area. So you send out like, hey, go, here's a mission from Starfleet Command. Go explore these different uncharted or barely charted or relatively unknown star systems and see if you can find some habitable planets where we can set up bases or settlements that might be handy, considering we're going to be right next to a highway to the Gamma Quadrant. Okay, now, cool. That works.
Sisko watched season 1 of Next Gen, and he saw the part where Riker gets in Picard's way and is like, no, captains cannot leave the ship. Away team missions must be led by the commander. And he's like, well, shit, I'm a commander. Well, fuck that desk job. I'm going to go fly around and do geological survey missions with the head janitor. Forget sending out, Dax and the lady with the space wheelchair. Whatever the fuck happened to her. Or any of the other Starfleet people. I need to be personally involved in going out and doing real estate scouting.
I think it's important as part of trying to get him into the action that Deep Space Nine is pretty shorthanded. So it's not like it's the luxurious Enterprise where you have, relatively senior officer level mission specialist experts that can be expected to be able to assist with going on geological surveys or that sort of thing. There's like, maybe 24 Starfleet people on Deep Space Nine or however many that is at this point, and not necessarily a lot of officers. And so, all right, well, whose turn is it to go out there? The commander decides to take a shift and go out with O'Brien. I get it.
So the last time we watched Star Trek, the last paycheck they had, Miles O'Brien had been presumably killed and replaced by a murder duplicate to sabotage security conferences. And before that was Armageddon.
He had space aids from the Armageddon game.
And then before that was the alternate, which was
That is the one where Odo met his dad.
Oh, that's where the security chief goes on a murder rampage and tears the station apart. Before that is Rivals. That's where space gambling threatens to rip the station apart. Correct. I see a lot of stuff in here that really needs the guy in charge to be in his seat. So I get
a lot of catastrophes are breaking out on the local Doom level. You're going to need you there, but
the local neighborhood space butthole ovipositing one dilemma per paycheck, if not more.
Ben, you are the realist man we have in Starfleet, right? You beat up Klingons and Ops. Like, you are the man. You are the Doom Slayer to handle the Doom levels that get spit out at you. You need to be there.
What do you mean you were on a runabout doing geographic research?
Do you think you're a Starfleet officer or something? No, you're our chief enforcer at the border, right? You're the ice guy who's making sure no one gets in.
Well, he's doing a terrible job after the scabby people. So yeah, you've taken really the two worst people to lose from physically being on the station. I don't know if there's anyone possibly worse. You should have had Odo and fucking Jadzia out here doing this thing. They're out in a runabout. They've found a planet that looks great. There's a conversation going on between O'Brien and Sisko where it sounds like Sisko's got clear plans or expectations, I should say, for Jake to go into Starfleet.
Correct.
And he wants O'Brien to start giving him duties around the station because Sisko has doubts about Jacob's viability as a Starfleet officer. Apparently some test scores didn't look great, and he's trying to work through these concerns.
And I kind of am spoiled for the fact that Jake's character gets pretty well defined early on in the show, and he's not a Starfleet officer. Obviously, he never goes to the academy. Like, not a spoiler, really.
Sure.
And so I forgot that they actually do work through a bit of plot in this season to establish that, like, Jake's not a character who's going to be in Starfleet, but we, the audience, have maybe an expectation the same way his father does, and we have a little bit of action here where, ultimately Jake's going to start to be growing into a very different kind of person than his father in terms of a profession. Not to say he won't have one, he does, and it's an important one, it's an interesting one, actually, but the discussion of, like, him realizing his teenage son is going to start entering in young adulthood and needs to be given guidance and needs to learn what it is he's going to do in life as he, like, laments that he got struck out by him in the holodeck, in the holosuite, rather. Like, it's real, right? That's some real fatherhood stuff.
Did you notice in the runabout that all of the windows have panels over them and there's no space view out of any of the viewports?
No, and actually my mind kind of skipped over that. I was more focused on the conversation.
The juicy part of that conversation for me was the background into Miles O'Brien as a character.
Yeah, it really actually, like, helped flesh out the wounded. Like, how did you wind up the guy who you were told, who we found out about in that episode?
And that was the question too. Is like, how's this non-enlisted guy somehow holding tactical officer on the bridge of the
Rutledge, yeah,
under Benjamin Maxwell? And he said basically it was a do or die moment. They were on Setlik 4 or whatever.
Setlik 3, yeah.
Fucking correct me.
Listen, it's your thing to get things wrong and for me to correct you.
Actually, I was proud I even remember it was Setlik. So they've got a bunch of Cardassians. They're about to come gun them down or take them prisoners of war, which we know that the Cardassians are not gracious hosts.
To the point where, like, I think O'Brien said in that earlier episode in season 1, like, you just don't want to be their prisoner under any circumstance.
Yeah.
Actually, that was the episode where they went and found Major and Johnny Appleseed in the premiere.
Yeah. Their music selection's terrible. And they don't pay for the good Spotify, so there's a lot of Cardassian ads. It's terrible. It's torture. So he was not inclined mechanically, and he said he didn't know the difference between a turbolift or a transporter, but in those 9 or 8.5 minutes, he got the transporter working, beamed like 13 or 8, was it 8 or 13, whatever, beamed a handful of guys out of the way, and before he knew it, he was the tactical officer of the Rutledge, and that's how he got his gold uniform. It's great. His character's kind of a mess. There's a lot of conflicting information out of Next Gen that presented him as a formal officer.
Right.
And that's directly contradicted by Deep Space Nine stuff. So it's good to see them like
they're doing some soft retconning.
Yeah.
To try and make his backstory make sense, because obviously he was on screen as an extra before they figured out who he was, so they have to resolve some of that, sort of incongruity that happened in the background. But now you get a sense of what they intend for him, which is he was an enlisted man who was essentially befriended into an officer position out of desperation as a consequence of casualties. And Maxwell made him who he is, and somebody who is a senior non-commissioned officer that is given officer-like duties, and actually officers report to him as a consequence of his demonstration of his value and his commitment to duty and his ability to operate under adverse war conditions, essentially. And why, this guy's the chief of operations out of the fucking Raggedy Edge next to Cardassian space, because he's actually proven he can operate under those specific circumstances.
It's a good look for Benjamin Maxwell. Shame we never get to see him again.
It does, and it's easy to say that because we know that's true. But get your pen out, man. Like, let's what if an episode where we have Benjamin Maxwell on this. He's being held hostage by Starfleet and as a consequence of his crimes. We know that he was court-martialed. Could be that the Cardassians desire some kind of retribution, right? You could have tied a plot in where O'Brien gets involved or is subject to some kind of reprisal against Maxwell because they know of his relationship with him. That he, maybe he gets released from prison, starts working on the station in civilian capacity. He could have done a million things where you could have tied all of that back together and it would have really fit.
Or you could have told a Section 31 story worth telling where Captain Maxwell is directly involved with Dominion War against Cardassian
right.
bullshit.
He gets pulled in because he's proven he's actually willing to take actions that other Starfleet officers are not. Oh, yeah.
Just give me the t-shirt, get rid of Magneto, and Maxwell was right.
Maxwell was right. So they get to the planet, they do some scans. There is a low-level danger field that they detect that's not allowing them to make contact with a group of humans that aren't supposed to be there. There's not supposed to be any settlers here, so they're very curious why there's humans here. And foolishly, they both decide to beam down before determining what the danger field is actually going to do. And oopsie daisy, it turns out nothing electronic works. We're stuck. We're just stuck.
These are human colonists, so when they lose the universal translator, they can still speak English or basic or whatever the fuck it's called. They beam down, freeze right there. Turn around, you got some Robin Hood guys with bow and arrow on them. The older one goes, "Oh my goodness, Starfleet. The uniforms have changed. We've been down here 10 years. We're stuck. You're stuck too. Let me bring you back to base camp." And there's a quick check to just make sure that, the communicator and the tricorder and whatever are all inoperable.
No, they established the premise here of, no, these are guys who are legitimately colonists that wound up off course for reasons the plot will tell you about, but they're pretty like, oh yeah, Starfleet. I guess we should have expected someone from Starfleet to find us eventually. Like that was always in our minds that this could happen. They're not stunned that it's occurred. They greet them with open arms, actually, pretty quickly.
Yeah, had one of them stayed up on the ship, it would have completely sabotaged Cult Lady's plans, like, big time.
It really would have. Just like O'Brien beamed down. Yeah, he's like, I can't reach anybody. Nothing's going on. Call for backup. Figure our way out of this. Then all of basically the plot doesn't happen. They both basically have to beam down for the plot to happen.
This lady's plan sucks.
Let's get to the lady, though. So we are ushered over to what we find out is the remains of the SS Santa Maria. It's a nice Columbus reference there. And it has been converted essentially into a living quarters for the surviving crew of this colonization vessel that wound up off course and set down on this planet because of damage, and then found out the hard way that apparently there's some kind of field that prevents anything technological from happening. They can never take off or repair or do anything. None of their tools work, and as a consequence, they've become, I guess you'll call it a Iron Age level technology encampment, but with Federation know-how. So, they're using applied logic to recreating basic technology, knowing like what does and does not work. This is most seen in their medical treatments, where they're using local mosses and funguses to legitimately treat disease because they know the germ theory of disease, but don't have any kind of advanced medical technology. And the key character here, we have two. We have Joseph, easy one for me to remember, who's the older mechanic from the Santa Maria, and then Alexis, who is the leader of this encampment, leader of these settlers. And this woman, her superpower is that she is extraordinarily charming. She is, she has this conviction in everything she does that makes you want to believe what it is she's saying. I think that she did a great job playing the role of essentially a charismatic cult leader that enraptured all of these people under her spell, because she alone had the answers for how to proceed in this environment, as we will find out, because she, of course, arranged for this to happen.
I'll give you side check as a charming person that was also annoying and had bad qualities, but ultimately won you over. This lady just comes off right out of the jump with cult leader vibes. And if there's any real mud to throw at this episode, it is that it was extremely evident right off the rip exactly what the plot was here. And you couldn't really take any joy out of the reveal that, surprise, surprise, they're stuck there because of her specifically.
I completely agree, and I still love her character. You're all right. Everything you said was right. There is no question whatsoever that she's a cult leader from the jump. In fact, they kind of conclude that immediately once they start reading her books around, and it's like, don't you think it's weird that she's kind of got this whole prophetic doom thing about humanity having to return to its roots, and then suddenly that's exactly what fucking happens? Up to and including Sisko having a great confrontation where he just literally calls her on it.
Well, what else are you going to do when you try to flesh peddle people at Ben Sisko?
We'll get to that, but I love that she's a cult leader, and she arranged a circumstance by which to start one. Like, no, I'm a cult leader. I started this cult. This was all on purpose. I did this because I'm right, and I wanted to explore my theories because I'm convinced I am so self-righteous as it relates to my my convictions. It's okay. No, I buy it. I buy it. I like it.
She's good at technology. She knows a lot about gardening. Apparently, she's an okay cook. She's got some decent leadership skills. Not very good at numbers and population planning. She could fall right in, speaking of Voyager, with the 37s in terms of what was their Westworld episode? No, that was Enterprise, where there was the colony of humans from
the North Star.
The Greys stole them. And I forget what our initial research and like what the minimal viability of a population has to be
for enough genetic diversity so that you don't wind up with a colony of impaired people. Yeah, inbreds, yeah.
30 people or less, and only 2 kids in the next generation coming up. This place is doomed.
You're not going to make it much longer, guys. You're not. You got another 10 years in you.
He's, I don't know, 18 years older than the other kids. It's going to be very awkward, but he will rule over all 3 of them and be the king when I have died. Yeah. So it seems very nice at this colony. Everybody remembers the old ways and the old days. They've been there less than 10 years, I believe. There's questions as to where Federation soccer leagues are. Interesting throwaway that one of the star players had his knee blow out, and the bio implant he has is not as good as the organic one.
So even in the 24th century, you blow that ACL, you're done, skis. 24th century tech can't help your blown out knee if you're halfback.
The camp whore is just only interested in dresses and pretty things, and she's very clearly been thoroughly brainwashed by whatever nonsense is going on here. There's a lot of this episode that just sticks out to me as very Gilligan's Island-y.
especially just the outfits and the stone/Iron Age sort of element of it.
What it's missing
It's
is
cheap.
it's missing fancy technology made possible by way of coconuts.
This kind of cultural impulse takes different forms depending on where and when you are, right? And it's often religious in nature, particularly in the United States, where we think of the Amish and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Of people who reject technology because it drives you away from the vital task of being able to um, explore what you're capable of. And we see that even now in the 20th century here in our country, and the way that people rely on technology to make their lives easier, but then aren't they're losing some basic capacity to interact with their environment in a way that allows them to problem solve through things and demonstrate that they're masters of their environment. They're instead being kind of governed by their technology. And this is just, I think, a natural outflow of that idea made flesh in the 24th century when it's even worse, right? Like technology is now literally capable of satisfying your basic needs indefinitely. You need not have ambition to affect your environment. We've solved that problem. So if you're somebody who's a radical on this stuff, you can start to try and say, like, I need to find a way out of civilized life, and I need to go with a colony ship out into the wilderness where things are at least a little hard.
And that's something we've talked about at great length. The boredom that can come for some members of the Federation, especially those living in the lap of luxury on Earth. Why would you turn your back on all that Earth has to offer? What is the promise of being a colonist, really? And that's kind of a disconnect for this episode because we've seen colonial life in the Federation, and it is not always easy. There's some shitty colonies out there, and there's some colonies that just don't make it, and they have their own weird collapses, whatever hell Tasha Yar went through.
Right. And Hell Enterprise has the first version of that in Terra Nova, right? Like all human colonization has been difficult for a process. It's been a difficult process for humanity from the start.
But this lady wants to play on Nightmare. She doesn't want the luxury of tricorders, phasers, replicators, or medicine. She's going for her game plus Nightmare mode playthrough here. And really, this is the first time in a while, I think, that we've had a Outer Limits episode where we're trying to tell a big morality story by the end with the twist to kind of turn things on its side. I think there's a different way of telling the story, which would have been the boring way, but the way that would have made more sense, where everyone in this crew had signed up to play Iron Man mode instead of her basically hijacking people and ruining everyone's life.
Right. Like she never asked for their consent to be part of this experiment. It's not a group of people who sought out to do this. She decided to ensorcer them into doing it.
I think the more interesting story would have been people who were all there, all of the scientists that rejected technology and wanted to be, and then real cult vibes that trap Sisko there instead of, again, her hoodwinking a bunch of people. So
I think the hoodwinking makes it more interesting, though. Especially when you get to the ending, which I think I'm warmer on than you are.
Yeah. So it's cute. You got this Mass Effect 2 grade encampment they're at.
Yeah.
Out of the husk of the Hugo Gurn's back laying there, or whatever that was. They're there looking for Jacob's wayward dad.
You're right. Yeah. That tracks.
And right out of this gate, it's not since, what's the one where Sisko had the astral projection hottie? Mind's Eye or something. I don't know. It's been a while since we've seen someone trying to get Sisko out of that Starfleet uniform that fast. Change out of your clothes. Abandon your identity. Community. Ben. What are we going to do, when the ships show up and we're rescued? But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But for right now, you're going to help the community, and I'm going to start trying to indoctrinate you ASAP.
The struggle between Alexis and Sisko, as it relates to specifically her trying to get him to take off the uniform as a symbolic gesture of being open to assimilation within this, is very interesting in that for Alexis, obviously, it represents the greatest possible challenge for her abilities, right? Can I take a Starfleet officer who is very used to being in command and being part of the system that I hate and convince him I'm right? Can my charismatic skills, my cultist master skills work on this guy? And that's her goal, because if I can break him, I can break anybody, right? That's the way she's thinking. And Sisko, not for one fucking second ever being fooled by her, and is willing to confront her on a material basis every step of the way, defend what he sees as his ethical and moral duty in this circumstance, and up to and including the fantastic choice of, after he is taken out of the hotbox and initially punished, and then he chooses just to go back in to quietly and silently reject the premise of him being part of the community in the most visceral way that he can. Like, I'm not going to take the water. I'm not going to put on the clothes. I'm literally going to crawl back into my torture without anybody making me.
I like the big deal he makes on keeping the uniform on as well, and reinforcing, because I know the uniform literally as a material thing is a big part of some Sisko speeches down the line. So him making the big deal out of it now is very nice groundwork that they're laying. That to this guy, this clothing means more than comfort or playing ball or anything else, and it's a hill he's willing to die on. So they show him around. They get in their quarters. Amazingly, there's 2 extra rooms, which first I was like, so they just have guest rooms just in case. But when you got people dying left and right from malaria,
space. Yeah, it's these rooms that just have a bunch of comfortable looking pillows everywhere.
Pillows and handwritten books. She's like Kevin Spacey in Seven, just filling these composition pads up with all of her thoughts and leaving them out there to indoctrinate people as they become available. Meanwhile, back on Deep Space Nine, no hide nor hair of Quark, Bashir, or Odo. This is just Kira and Jadzia.
It's the first time there are 4 members of the cast that's in the opening credits who are not in an episode like this. So Jake obviously is often absent, but the other 3, as you noted, not even a line, not a single camera shot of any of them. The only other people we see are, in fact, Dax and Major Kira, and they are talking about how there is a ship that is, I guess, the flagship of Admiral Mitsuya,
the USS Card Shark,
is showing up because apparently the Admiral has a rolling card game, and Sisko's getting an invite because if you're gonna do some gangster shit, you best get Starfleet Suge Knight in on your card game.
So this crazy Admiral, he's not out trying to betray the Federation to the skin tightening people or brain bug people or, breaking treaties on cloaking technologies. No, this Admiral is just a ruthless card shark out on commanders and captains out of their Federation credits.
I'm going to divert this giant starship's mission so that I can have a, quote, discussion about Cardassian politics where I invite Ben Sisko, who I know as a bad poker face, apparently, to my game so I can clean him out. And Dax being like, I've been working on this man's poker game for 2 lifetimes, and he just can't bluff. I don't understand it, which I really love. Of like, I can't get him to be able to lie effectively in a card game. I don't get it.
I'm gonna do it, Joe.
Oh, there it is.
Throw the whole plantation plot in the trash. Double down on this black market card game. This guy has moved a capital ship. This is a flagship. This is an Admiral's flagship. He's dragging it all the way out to the Deep Sheets 9, right? I need a big poker showdown. I need Quark in Sisko's corner, like training him how to gamble. I mean, we could have done some great stuff here. Forget that rickety-ass episode 3 back with the space gambling doodad and the Quark's nemesis. That bad gambling episode. Get rid of that. I need Admiral Snake Eyes.
You could have definitely gotten Quark in on this episode if that was the case.
What was that Admiral's name?
Mitsuya.
James Blackjack Mitsuya versus Quark.
And the Kraken apparently is an Excelsior class ship, which makes sense because they are the ones that are kind of like the internal patrol vessels, right? Like they're off the front lines. So if you're an admiral going from like sector to sector to like have conversations with commanders and meet up with other ships, you wouldn't probably take a Galaxy class. You'd probably take something a little bit that doesn't have to be a little beat up, like get it off the front line.
This admiral's Excelsior, the Mitsuya, or what'd you say it was?
It was an Excelsior, yeah.
The saucers painted up like a roulette table. This thing is so obviously just a fucking space casino. Maybe he's even there to poach Quark, and Sisko has to that's the big dilemma of this episode is if Mitsuya wins, he gets Quark, but if Sisko wins, Quark stays, and he's never able to bring the USS Roulette back around ever again.
It's just, again, let's have the adventures of Admiral Mitsuya, known space gangster who happens to be a Starfleet admiral, going from place to place, getting into wacky, roguish hijinks as a consequence of his gambling habit.
I love it.
That's your Lower Decks episode that we never fucking got. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, this was a missed deep cut, boys.
Well, we weren't there to make the joke yet.
That's true.
Okay. There is big doubts back on Planet Plantation as to what's causing this plot field. The answer that's given by the locals is that there's a lot of stink rocks out in the swamps, and they think that that's probably most likely responsible. The engineer of the colonial ship that crash landed was the last holdout against the Luddite movement before they finally won him over. So that's the one that they get the most mileage with. And I like too, like when he shows up, they're like, "Oh no, we're a runabout's above there." And the guy's like, "What's a runabout?" And
runabout?
Like,
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that entered service 2 years ago, and it's a great runabout episode too. I really like them talking about the assembly teams, and if they half-assed it, they're going to pull the ships apart and everybody's going to die. But this guy has lingering doubts, but he's drank the Kool-Aid to a degree that I wasn't ready for when we get to the end sequence. But this guy's spear has been broken, as has everybody else's. And we really find out the true degree of cult indoctrination that's really taken place when Sisko is getting ready to turn in for bed after his... Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over the field scene.
Yes, the first scene where we have Sisko bent over working the fields. Yes.
This Starfleet fabric is very good, by the way. Dirt just does not stink to it at all.
All purpose. It's a great space uniform like that.
It's got that 3M stain block on it. So there he is on his hands and knees, tilling the mud, impressing everybody, by the way, because we get some nice character development that he and his brothers were made to go out and tend crops by his culinary father.
Right. It was a restaurant. As we like, it's not his. This is all very interesting and backstory they return to like in the future. So this is the first time you really get everything. His father owns a restaurant. It's in New Orleans. He's from New Orleans, and his father is definitely somebody who insisted on real food, really cooking, and so that meant that he actually knows his way around a garden and what cultivation takes, which is probably a rare trait in the 24th century.
But after a hot and sweaty day in the field, there he is back in his quarters, flexing those guns, showing off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Coiled pythons that they are.
I mean, I wouldn't say he's anywhere near Mayweather, but who could be?
I mean, how can you? Mayweather is unfair. It's just not cool. Not cool to compare anyone to him.
Mayweather would have just simply inhaled and then forcefully exhaled and blown that EM blocking field clear off the planet. Plot over.
They would have never put him into the punishment box. He would have taken the whole crowd.
He would have snap kicked them and put them in the punishment box. He also would have had the opportunity, had Travis Mayweather been in the quarters when the pretty girl shows up to make googly eyes at him, done some really great daytime soap opera work and
Yeah,
impressed us.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I think he would have absolutely taken a solid swing in the batter's box there. I don't think he would have. I don't think he would have passed.
Ben, however, looks at her and says, "Blink twice if you're in danger."
No, he, you know, it lends to how serious he takes his duties, right? Like, even in this circumstance, I'm not gonna give an inch, right? Like, clearly, you have been sent here to sexually entice me. One of the young courtesan character that we heard obsessing about the dresses shows up and wants to, rub him down with oil, and he sees through it immediately, and then decides I'm just going to go confront the leader because I'm not having this. I'm not having someone sex trafficked to me so that someone can win a fucking argument. I'm not having it.
He tells her to scoot along, move along home, and then he goes and directly confronts Mrs. Cult Leader.
So I think this is my favorite scene in the entire show. So he comes in and not only directly accuses her immediately of sending someone to essentially sleep with him to gain his compliance, but also openly, as I mentioned, accuse her of somehow being responsible for this, since her personal politics and view of the world seems to be perfectly aligned with the circumstances they happen to be in. And I think it's awesome because the answer from Alexis is unblinking confidence, right? Like, Sisko's an intense man to have to stare down alone. He's in there with you alone, and he is seeing through you, and he's seeing through you. And your only really defense is that you have to show no quarter and that you're committed to your line. So when he calls out, I think you're responsible for this because it's too perfect, she has to come back with some pseudo-religious, essentially, conviction to say, sometimes fate puts you in the perfect position that you're supposed to be in. And I'm sorry for you that that's never happened to you. And you have to sell it. And she sells it really well. And I think that's why I'm warmer on this episode than you. Is I really think her performance, particularly in this scene, is so strong and convinces me that I can see how everyone else here fell in line with what she wanted over the course of 10 years. I see it. She's that good. Not convinced.
Listen, man, these guys don't have an option. She fucked him good, and it was follow this laminated chart to Taming the Wilds that I just so happen to have, or we're all gonna die.
Right.
I'm not blaming anybody for going along with the program when it was the only game in town, and they didn't have this Swiss Army knife of a man, Miles O'Brien, there to turn a can of soup into a Geiger counter or whatever the fuck he ends up doing.
Episode really starts to turn after he goes to confront Alexis. Alexis signs him to guard duty as a bit of a punishment. Try and break him. He refuses to break. And he the next morning, he also refuses to not pull his shift in the fields to demonstrate that he has no quit in him, and dispatches O'Brien to like, all right, let's get the fuck out of here. Find some goddamn way of dealing with this because we know there's something suspicious happening. And things escalate when Miles gets caught off screen fucking with electronics stuff when he should be working. And that ultimately brings us to when they have a confrontation over trying to reach the ship to be able to treat somebody who's ill, that there's, maybe they're violating the rules, they're wasting their time, and you see more of Alexis's like technique as a cult leader come out. It's kind of hard to describe. Like, she frames the objection that they trying to reach the runabout to get medical equipment for somebody who was hit by the disease from a local insect was bad. She has to pivot around to say, like, that is a negative thing that would be a waste of time. It's like a brainwashing technique, and you kind of get to watch it live. I'm struggling to describe it, but that's the scene where that kind of all happens, and it's well done.
It's a deflection.
Yeah.
Because O'Brien has a real path to success that she cannot allow to happen. If they make contact with the runabout, they'll find out the runabout's just not there because at some point she's turned the dampening field off and has a way to somehow transport herself up into orbit, get onto the runabout, which, by the way, I don't think there's any sort of like car keys or thumbprint scan or anything. If you walk on these runabouts, you could be a plantation owner cultist. You could be a Christmas elf biochemical weapon people.
Apparently, just the keys are ignition. Just go.
Keys are in the ignition. You can rewrite the fucking sensor logs however you want. There's no passwords on anything. You can tell the fucking thing, go fly into a sun. It'll do it. That's the dummy Federation way. So yeah, if they were able to get their shit working, they would find out the runabout's not there, which instantly the jig would be up. Completely like, hey, you're maliciously stuck here. On top of the fact that she's got a doodad buried out in the fields that's blocking all this. So them using their time to try to address this solvable problem that would definitely fix the bigger problem, which is someone literally on their deathbed. What they all should have been doing is combing the woods, looking for clickable plants so they could collect spores, molds, leaves, and saps.
Clickable plant. That's very good. It's like you're playing the was it the New World or something like that? Like, that's a good one. I can click on it.
Just wow. Go out in the field and collect 6 blue flowers. We're going to grind that into a paste and see if we can't wake Mallory up or whatever her name was. So she's laying there slowly dying and they got like one arm covered in leaves and shit rubbed on her left arm and a leech on her neck. Had they followed our plan, maybe she would still be alive. Her death is basically their fault and they're going to be punished. And I'm not going to punish your subordinate, Ben. I'm going directly for your throat because if I break you, O'Brien will fall in line as well. So they drag him over to the sweatbox, which I was very delighted by because the last time we saw this sweatbox, Joe, was the Section 31 Gotham City meeting over there in San Francisco Harbor.
It was stacked up in the corner, yeah.
Where there's this chimney sitting on the dock for some reason. These are collapsible Gaylords. I have these at work. They have it upside down.
I've seen these before, yeah.
You can see where the forklifts or the pallet jacks are supposed to go in to lift these things. This is upside down. At the
bottom. Mm-hmm.
They got it flipped upside down. So they're cool. And every time I see them now, I'll just be like, oh, it's the Ben box. And they go, all right, you ever see that movie Shawshank Redemption? Well, here we are.
Get in the hole.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout, like, Sisko has a very specific commanding body language where he is not giving an inch even in his posture. He, at the very last second, decides that he's going to go along with this because of the implied threat of violence. Which is interesting because obviously Sisko and O'Brien is not enough to take everyone, but is enough to potentially, because there's not a lot of weapons.
What? What did you just say?
It's like if everyone jumped Sisko and O'Brien, they're probably not going to be able to take them all, right? I know, individually, none of these people can stand up to them, which we get a reminder of in a little bit here. But, they can't take all, 50 of these people at the same time. This isn't a John Woo film.
Brawling Irish O'Brien.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're not going down without a fight. I'm not saying there's not casualties. But, these two would get overwhelmed.
Knocks 2 people out in this episode alone, right?
It's true.
And that's without his PTSD even triggering.
Yeah, that's him playing on story mode. That's him not even digging deep.
This other guy, I don't know if you've met him yet. His name's Death Row Sisko.
Yes.
Now, a Klingon has the strength of 5 humans. And Sisko beat the ever-living shit out of one of them.
Without really effortlessly beat the shit out of one of them.
While being distracted by watching his direct subordinate getting her ass whipped by a space hooker. All right? Kira the liability Nerys is not around to slow Death Row Sisko down. Listen, I think if they would have started trying to put real hands on people, it would have been a Mike Tyson moment. He would have been.
You expect like a Neo versus 50 Agent Smiths. He's just rolling all of them. It's no problems.
Yes. Women and children both getting punched included as well, right?
and in a single punch too. Like he's just like taking out whole families with a single swing.
He's got the cleave feet, so he's just punching from one person and cleaving into the next.
You start with the child so that you continue to like link the attack, right?
Mm-hmm. We've gone from ops of rage to fields of rage, plantations of rage.
Yes.
So he gets in, he does a stint, they pull him out, he gets brought over to the principal's office, and she goes, sucks this is going on, but hey, I don't know if you saw Chain of Command, we could be really good friends, and I'm willing to give you, luxuries like water. Just change out of that uniform, and we can be back, to living the good life here in paradise. And instead, as you said, he just goes back out to the box and crawls back in, and everybody's like, oh my goodness. Meanwhile, back on Deep Space Nine, they figure out that there's something wrong. They can't get a hold of the Rio Grande, which is the runabout they took out there. So Kira and Dax, who are the next two people directly in control of the station.
Correct.
They leave, which leaves...
That actually is interesting thought. One presumes there's Odo, I guess, isn't in the chain of command.
Ops.
Yeah,
it's the guy that was lying to O'Brien that was doing the security repairs early.
There's some junior lieutenant somewhere. The lieutenant, like the characters we use for our skits, right? Like those are the guys who are in charge now. Like, was it Lieutenant Porkins, the extra security guy? Like, he's probably it right now.
He's a good one to put in there. So they're going to come back to the station and find out that the Space Joe Dirt people have returned, and now that guy's stuck in a shoots and ladders game.
I liked the conversation that Kira and Dax have as they're trying to solve this problem. They find the runabout, but it's like on autopilot, flying at warp in a random direction. They got to go stop it because it's going to hit something. They find it. Option one is the beam onto it on warp, which Dax is like, you don't want to do that.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? The
it is supposed to be. Yeah. It's supposed to be a thing. That you don't want two objects moving at warp, you don't want to try and beam between them. Because if you fuck it up, you're dead.
Well, I mean, that doesn't, dude. It's a fucking transport. You fuck anything with the transporter up, you're dead.
It's because of the relative distances, right? Like, you're moving at such a fast speed, which is why, obviously, when they did this with in Enterprise, with the actual, like, physical transfer and having to, like, build, like, it was even more intense. But, like, all right, you got this is an uncontrolled vessel, you're a controlled vessel. You're moving at the same speed. All right, simple enough, beam over. Okay, what if at 1 second it suddenly lurches ahead 1.1 warp? Well, suddenly it's way distant from you on a proximity basis, and suddenly that beaming is not going to where you thought it was going. It's going to an entirely different relativistic position. That means you're just dead because you're beaming into space. It's not like an impulse where it's maybe a little bit more controllable, where there's less variance, where like the computer can keep up with warp. Right?
My headcanon has always been that when you have transportation between two vessels, the reason why you appear in the transporter room of the other vessel is that the Enterprise talks to the Excelsior and says, here is the data.
Here's the bridge. We're bridging our systems. Yeah.
Here's the download packet of this guy. You have it in your computer now. And then their transporters are what rematerializes him. And that's why you appear in that transporter room. But I guess, it wasn't until this episode I was really like, I guess they've never made a big deal out of this before. They
don't say you can't. They definitely make a point of it being risky.
So they decide to grab it with a tractor beam and like drag it to impulse, which seems super crazy dangerous. And I'm like, there's no like command codes. As easy as these runabouts are to just be a random plantation lady to walk on and order around, there's no remote override where it's like, hey, stop this. Especially when you just did it in the Space Elf episode where you had one fly one way and the minor complaints. And as someone who's just watched Voyager, almost insignificant compared to the plot holes back there.
And I want to bring that up. Like, watching Phage, for example, which is an episode with a lot of good acting, which was one of the two we watched. It has probably the best Janeway speech when he's like laying down the law to the Vidians. It's amazing how much better the acting is on this show. This random episode that is kind of a B, right? Just the individual performances from everyone, including just Kira and Dax interacting with each other as they try to solve this problem, which we haven't seen a lot of, right? We haven't seen a lot of those two specifically having to work together as much as we want to. We really like them in the Bajoran
maybe
trilogy.
The third time, I think.
And you see it in, Dax is sarcastic. Dax is a little irreverent. Dax is not particularly like command oriented, but she's a scientist and she's like, I'm a Starfleet science officer. It's my job to come up with a better idea. Well, this is literally a line that comes out of her mouth. And of course she makes a sex joke as she is talking about how she's going to use a lasso trick, and I'm going to go ahead and use a tractor beam to essentially pull this thing out of its warp bubble. And according to the stress that these vessels are supposed to take, this should work fine. If they cut corners on when they manufactured this one, we might be in for some trouble. But that's it. It's either that or I scramble your molecules and you might end up dead. Which one do you want to go with?
You're sure there's not like a remote control that we can't, like command codes?
Command codes, just put them in and tell them to turn off.
I saw Wrath of Khan. They had command codes. The runabouts
I would have liked a line of spackle that they tried that and it doesn't work. I agree.
Fair.
They're missing on that.
So we're in season 7 now of TNG.
Correct.
This ship, this colonial vessel left 10 years prior, so that ship would have been older than the earliest views that we had of 24th century. I don't know if you saw it, but like the hallways inside of there, and especially when they're standing at the outside of the vessel and they bring what's her face comes out to say, hey, Mary died and also O'Brien's in trouble. Did you see the bulkhead in the back, like the hallway?
Yeah.
It's like season 1 TNG Enterprise hallways.
Which it makes sense for if it's 10 years ago.
And that's, I love it, dude. It reminds me of The Raven when they had Annika Hansen's dad, Ugg Hansen.
Ugg Hansen, yes.
And the work they put into like making that look appropriate to where Federation ship technology was. So that was really cool. But Sisko goes back in the box. He comes out. Hey, we got to get for really real about this. And then O'Brien's like, all right, I think I got a way to figure this out. And he lures the nice engineering guy into a cave. And he's like, hey, look at this pile of rocks over here. I got a way to like figure out what's going on. The guy's like, shucks, I can't let you do this. And he's like, well, you going to stop me? He's like, no. He's like, well, why don't you go tie your shoe? The guy's like, dude, come on.
The way it gets built up is, I'm going to go do this thing. Can you help me? No. Oh, yeah, that's right. You get put in the box, right? Okay. How it's communicated not exactly as a threat, but it kind of is a threat. Because what he does is O'Brien doesn't give this Joseph guy an opportunity to say no. He says, you can either be part of this or I'm going to render you unconscious so that you can be free of culpability.
I'm going to give you an alibi.
Yeah. You can choose the alibi or you can choose to assist me. And the way it happens is like, why don't you look at those rocks I just found? And he's like, Jesus, really? And he's like, it just like, O'Brien just dead ass looks at him and says, I can do it in a way that it won't hurt. Like, I am Miles O'Brien. I know how to render people unconscious. I'm an expert. I got you.
I need you to read between the lines here. When I'm telling you that I know of a way to do it without it hurting.
There are other ways.
Did you hear me say it? Or?
We can explore other options if you prefer. I would prefer not to.
Have you had a child yet? Would you like to be able to have a child still?
So I like the way that he just says, okay, you know what, Miles, I believe you. Hold on, let me look at these rocks. Bam. Yeah. Okay, he's out.
Mr. Knockout O'Brien. So he goes off into the woods with his phaser, and he's got this hollowed out gourd with some water and a magnet rock that's like his compass in it. Very scientific.
It does show that he's like, I'm just the guy who comes up with a way to use the existing material to solve the local problem, and his local problem
you said
is
they didn't have the professor on Gilligan's Island here. Well, the professor has arrived, and he has hollowed out a coconut, and he has an EM field observer tricorder,
which is a magnetic rock in a bowl of water, and it spins around when it's near something that's creating the field.
It's actually a monocorder. They get out there, and this lady, in all of her wisdom, only buried this thing roughly 2 inches under the dirt, and he starts swiping it away, and there's fucking Knight Rider lights under the grass. And luckily enough, he moves his head just in time for an arrow to sail over his head and hit the tree.
Hey, listen, we've seen it once before on television.
Yes, we did. Erratic head movements take care of it. We now switch over to Predator, where young, I don't even know what to call this guy, gets
the
way
son.
over his head.
Yeah, the son decides, I'm going to hunt the most dangerous game man. And very unfortunately for him, the man he has chosen to hunt today is a mob with a skull where the level markers should be, right? Like, he's out there, he's level 20, he's picking off mobs, and then suddenly he like walks into the fucking world boss and decides to take a fucking crack at it. It does not go well for him.
It's Robin Hood versus the Predator.
Imagine how Felton, this man is, he is cut, he is in shape, he is 20 years younger than this guy, he has a weapon, and he manages to get absolutely rolled by Miles O'Brien. Coming, setting up his uniform, setting up a target, having him walk under him, and just coming down on top of him like he's he's gonna capture his prey with nothing but his fucking wife beater and shorts, like. What?
O'Brien's up in the tree looking down at this guy, and his like face like wobbles, and all of a sudden it's Julian Bashir's face, and he just unloads all of this rage about getting his ass kicked at racquetball on this poor kid and knocks him the fuck out. The under uniform that these guys are wearing, it's like this judge's mock turtleneck, short sleeve purple, disgusting thing, and then like boxers.
Yeah, that's it. Don't get it. It's like seems very I don't know,
uncomfortable. Terrible.
Whatever, it's suitable. You've got 38 year old on City Miles O'Brien popping out.
City Miles O'Brien, ass. I like that.
City Miles O'Brien. And it immediately just pops the string out of the fucking bow and arrow. Like, yeah, all right, I'm tying your ass up, and I'm just taking you back home.
Damn, is he about to Garrett this kid? Like, oof.
And he took the time to put his uniform back on too. He's like, fuck you, kid. Hold on a second,
dude. I wouldn't be caught in fucking public wearing that other bullshit either.
Sure as shit. Of course, his GAD is working now because he turned off the machine. Comes in, blows the lock off the hotbox, gets his boss out. It was like, hey, you know why my gun works now? Because it was being suppressed by a machine I found in the fucking wilderness. Y'all been had.
All those dead people. I don't think they really made enough point about the number of innocent lives that died on this lady's fetish that she had here. I also want to mention, everybody's got really great teeth. The sugar balance on this world must be excellent, because having gone through a bad oral dental situation not too long ago, I think about going back in time to the Dark Ages and like other time travel and stuff, and I will never time travel to any place that does not have at least okay dentist plans.
It's true. You have to maintain your dental health. And I don't know if maybe Federation veneers are just so powerful that you can exist in like a Stone Age environment and not have to worry about it. Who knows?
Like that was a weird requirement of this colonial plan, is that you had to have like full replacements.
Yeah, like you have duridium teeth, like it's just an unbreakable device. It allows you to chew bark and everything.
Oh, I'd like to think that this lady really did have great planning on this and that she engineered the entire crew and basically hand selected and like sold these guys on with like timeshare ferocity with her cult leader like mental abilities and just wore these guys down until she had the exact team of people she wanted to bring out and strand out there. But the jig is up. They say, hey, you know, this is all the bad stuff that happened. Sisko does say, what about the dead? And she says, well, that's an acceptable loss that I knew I was going to have to get into, but I am willing to stand for what I have done because I've given these people community and community. And then the episode really falls apart for me.
I knew it.
Because she has this rousing speech about how if it wasn't for her, you know, the camp whore would be a file clerk, and, you know, the guy who was the chief engineer on a vessel would have just been a repairman for the rest of his life, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's just like, okay.
She
And
brainwashed them. And that's why I think it's a right ending. This woman brainwashed these people. They believe her. They're not. You just don't give up on your closely held beliefs because suddenly someone is. Oh, these strangers came by and have said that she's a liar, and you know she's even admitted to it. But we're bought into her philosophy. You don't just break that in a moment. They're like, yeah, maybe we all have to weigh what we're going to do. Maybe we turn it back on. They leave it ambiguous as to what their choices are going to be. But it's like, I'm not going to say that we don't have something here that we would miss. Maybe
I
it
don't
has
know,
to
man.
change.
If I was a guy that just got put in the box, the sweat box for stealing a candle, I think I'd be like, you fucking bitch. How dare you?
Yeah, and if this episode had another 10 minutes, maybe that would be an interesting, like, who decides to leave, who decides to stay. But I actually liked that these people don't immediately fold. Because now the fact that she's a charismatic cult leader it makes sense.
Listen,
she's brainwashed these people.
There's a good Cerritos follow episode here.
Yes. This is some gold that our friends there never found, which is unfortunate.
The often tedious chore of deprogramming Federation cultists and returning them back. I do like that the parting shot here is the two children of the camp standing there looking at where the people have transported out while everybody else has dispersed, which again,
because they've never seen it, right? Like this is new to them.
No, I think it's them being like, we're going to fucking die here. There's not enough of us to be sustainable. And that should have kind of been a back burner concern of this place is like, what are we giving these kids? This is going to turn into, what was the colony you just cited back from Enterprise? Jamestown?
Terra Nova.
Terra Nova. Yeah. We're going to be grown up in the mud eating armadillos. It was a meh episode for me. I would have much rather see the USS Roulette bring its space.
I'm not saying
poker.
the USS Roulette wouldn't have been fun, but I think this episode is a good. It's a B. I'm not saying it's great, but it's a solid, good episode, and I think it's good because the actors put in max effort. And after watching the Phage and seeing what it looks like when Voyager actors were doing the same thing, it's just night and day. Picardo's great. Phillips is good at playing the character he's being asked to play, but like Chakotay might as well not be on the show. B'Elanna kind of sucks. Tom's hit or miss. Cass takes a while to matter. And everyone in this episode here, we're in season 2, right? I get a great taste of who all of them are. I like them. They feel very lived in. Their interactions with each other feel very rich and warm, and there's a lot of juiciness going on here. And then Sisko having this confrontation with this cult leader, perfect. So yeah, it's not a great episode, but for those reasons, I would say it's at least good.
From here, we're going into Shadow Play, season 2, episode 16. We've got a picture of more cultists wearing white, and there's that little annoying girl. I think, isn't she the one that had the imaginary friend on Next Gen?
Oh yeah, it does look like that.
Yeah. At a colony in the Gamma Quadrant, Dax and Odo investigate the mysterious disappearance of several colonists. See, that's a good away team to send out as
Dax and Odo. See, we're getting
not two of the most important people on the entire station.
Well, thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of Eager Please. Like, share, subscribe, let people know about the show. That's all we can ask. See you next week.